This is a different kind of monologue today, somewhat ruminative. I think that's the word. It may not be. A cogitation, if you like, on where we are in this very advanced technical world in which we're about to launch into a more advanced technical world. And my thoughts are very much concerned with how we as humans can cope in this swamp of electrical and magnetic fields in a world that is advancing into a digital world in which I don't think that we are quite fully aware of the consequences that it will be. You see, we are human beings, and for thousands of years, of course, we've roamed this globe and we have managed to survive and work out technologies that have helped us along the way. These technologies, from flint axes to the motor car, have been extremely useful. Everything that we have done, of course, on the whole, has been quite destructive in many ways. You know, going and digging great big holes in the ground to extract flint axes and then selling them all around the world or wherever we could as Neolithic people was damage to a degree to the biosphere, but in the overall sort of things, not too much. Although the Neolithics did start to cut down great swathes of trees and learnt how to farm in a way that was quite wasteful. They would farm, and when the soil was depleted, they would just simply cut down more trees and farm on another patch and just leave that initial bit of land to grow back. But actually, by doing so, it was, of course, putting more trees back into the land, because trees will just grow anywhere, pretty much. But as we started to farm, we needed new ways to accelerate that, to feed us, and we invented the technologies, the plough, and as we've advanced nearer to the 20th century, of course, we now have tractors, and we've decided that actually we will cut out huge swathes of land and put in monoculture. And then in order to get that crop to its maximum capacity so that we can feed as many people as possible, we've manipulated that crop, not necessarily in a GM way, but by lots of crossbreeding and experimentation. And we now have crops that will grow abundantly. We have crops that will grow to a size that is easier for us to use our big machines. So we've always used technology to advance. And as we have done this, sometimes we have made huge mistakes. In many ways, I feel that we are living the last 100, 150, maybe even 200 years in a bit of an experiment, and that some of this experiment is not really as conducive to us as humans as we think. And as we've moved the farming world into a world of highly processed foods, grains which have lost so much of their nutrients in order to be productive and give great yields, and then turned into substances which aren't actually as good as we first thought they might be, but they're very good on a financial scale. I think also, and more worryingly, we have done the same with technology that we use in our everyday world. And I'm talking about electronic technology. You see, the world is, as I'm learning, in an environment of highly balanced electrical and magnetic fields, natural, part connected to the sun, connected to the solar system, to the universe, and its own electrical magnetic fields that have come about from its rotation and spinning and circling the sun and all of that, a natural process. And as a result of that, we as humans have evolved to work together with that. It would be a natural thing. However, go back to the 18th century, the latter half of the 18th century, when man was starting to use the cerebral capacity in his brain and understand what electricity was, and started to use it at first for amusement and then later as a treatment for potential health. Man has suddenly become aware of the enormous capabilities of electricity. But as he's advanced with those capabilities and invented amazing things like the telegraph, sending signals down wires, inventing television and radio, and then, of course, the internet, and also just those more simple things that we almost take for granted, electric light in the house, being able to plug in appliances and power them. It's almost as if we've never even considered that would the radiation from that electricity, would the electricity that is pushed into the atmosphere as a result of having a ring main in the house or having big powerful cables running down the road, that they might actually in the atmosphere affect us, affect our moods, affect our health? Have we really thought about that in any great detail? Were there any warning signs in the early days when electricity was being experimented with? Well, there were, of course, and a lot of things happened that were warning signs, that were effectively saying, be very careful with this technology, because although there's a lot of convenience that comes with it, there's a lot of unknown illnesses that are slowly unfolding and being associated with it. But no matter, it seems that we ploughed ahead out of necessity, out of desire, out of convenience, as well as out of war, in which, of course, we know that during wars, technology advances in huge leaps, and a lot of the safeguards, the side effects of technology in a war is kind of pushed to the side because you have the main objective, which is more urgent and necessary. And those side effects we'll worry about in peacetime. Yet peacetime doesn't ever seem to come. We seem constantly in some war at the moment here in the 21st century, and the same in the latter part of the 20th century. It does seem that we never get a moment's peace, and that we can actually examine things and say, do you know what, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. And through these leaps and advances in technology, I think there are people out there saying, hold on, just don't just assume that because you can't see the effects of radiation, for example, or electricity or phone lines and things like that, just because you can't see them, there isn't a connection to people's health. And there blatantly does seem to be from certain people who are calling it out. And there are things such as the Spanish flu, the influenza of the 1920s or the later 1918, when it started to come out and was killing huge populations as a result of this mysterious virus, the influenza virus, which turns out to have been related actually to flares from the sun and electricity that is being put over the biosphere that we live on, the electric fields that we humans have added all around. A lot of it was, of course, due to certain sunspots and changes, pulses from the sun, which has caused this strange virus, because the virus itself is really a detoxing of the body, of it getting rid of certain things that had come into it rather than something that was contagious. There were experiments being made with the influenza of trying to get patients to actually capture it, to pass it from one to another. And these experiments included getting phlegm and saliva and all sorts of nasty bits out of the body that were infected and putting them into other people. And yet those people didn't catch influenza. And so the radiation, and that being a natural occurrence from the sun, these sunspots, and then similar effects from huge numbers of wires and cables put into the ground or into the on poles above us, and the things like power cables, they are known to have effects on people. If you live near pylon, for example, carrying electricity, you'll be aware that you may have headaches and certain other ill effects from the cycles of the electricity spilling out. But these things are not generally known or even thought about because, again, we can't see them. And so that becomes problematic. We don't immediately associate it with it. My worry and my aim of this is to make people think about where we're going. We have the convenience now of Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. We know, for example, that Bluetooth headphones are quite lethal. You wouldn't want to put Bluetooth headphones in your ears because they're radiating high intensity radio waves into your head, which is going to damage your brain and your mental capacity. It may not be immediate, but years down the line, it may well affect your mental abilities. We've seen lots of stuff with dementia and Alzheimer's. Same with the telephones, mobile phones. We know that they are emitting EMFs, electrical magnetic fields, which are extremely dangerous. And it's best not to charge them up by your bed when you're asleep and you've been lowered into a more relaxed and receptive state with the phone pulsing continually, checking with the nearest mobile phone mast and sending out beams. We know that these things are dangerous. And we're surrounding our houses with these chips that connect to the internet through the Wi-Fi. And we're living in this field of our Wi-Fi, not realizing the effect that it's having on our bodies. People are getting ill and we don't realize quite what it is that's happening to us. My worry is the next stage when we move up to even stronger, shorter waves with the 5G. Instead of more relaxing, harmonious waves that are bigger, wider, longer and less harmful, the sort of curves that undulate like this, we're having the much shorter, much more focused, sharper waves. People say, but they're not that powerful. Not that much energy is going in them, but they're everywhere. And we don't know what that's like for 10 years, 20 years on the human. We don't know how much, if the power was put up too much, what that does to our brains. We don't really have a proper testing ground for it. And yet we're covering the earth with all of this technology. We're just advancing continually with this technology as we move into a digital age. I personally think that the digital age is an enslavement and a prison. You see, I'm old enough to be in the old analog way of things, where you could see how things worked. You could see how a typewriter worked. It was fixable and it was easy. It was manual, and yes, it was clunky and it was slow. Now when you pick up a mobile phone, you have no notion of how it works. You know how to operate it, but you don't know how it works. And you cannot see the radiation. You cannot see the waves damaging you. We hold them in our hands. We don't know what that's going to do to us. There are people who claim that they're getting various cancers and certain effects. We've seen the effect of the blood and how it changes the blood. Yet the convenience and the usefulness of these devices and how they are turning us into slaves to them, we don't see the dangers. As we move to a cashless society in which we're told that things like the CBDCs or other cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin will rely on mobile phones, and make us free, even if it makes us free from the nefarious bankers and those people that I often talk about who wish to control our lives, it doesn't make us free from the frequencies that are coming out and being emanated from these devices, from this continual area of digitization in which we're spending more time in front of screens that are radiating around us, lights and power, and these lines that are radiating around us and slowly making us ill all the time. I think we need to consider stopping, not going into an area in which we are radiated to the nth degree. How safe are we even now today? How safe are we really? Are we grounding ourselves? Are we connecting to the negative ions in the earth as we're bombarded with all this positive ions and radiation that is affecting our health? It may be that we need to find a different type of energy source, that instead of having wires and radio broadcasts, that we find a different technology. Maybe what we're doing today is not as safe as we think. And instead of advancing at huge rates so rapidly, that we ought to stop and think, actually, was there more benefit in the older analog world than we realized than this new, highly technical, chip-based, hologram-encased, digital ones and zeros world?